Today I want to show you the family tree of Ottoman sultans, and I'm going to use my new Asian royal family trees chart. And if you want information about how you can get this as a poster, you can go to my website usefulcharts.com/Asia. So the Ottoman dynasty is shown here in the dark red, and we're going to start with this individual here, who is Osman the First. And Osman, another alternative form of his name is Ottoman. The Greeks knew him as Ottoman, and that's where we get the word Ottoman. His dynasty is also known as the House of Osman, named after him. So that is where we get the name of the dynasty. Now, he was not yet a sultan or an emperor. The territory that they ruled was not large enough to be considered as such. The title he used was Bey, which was simply a Turkic word for a leader of a tribe. So the Ottomans, of course, were a Turkic group. And before we look at the descendants of Osman, who would go on to build the Ottoman Empire, let's look quickly at his ancestry. So before the Ottomans became the dominant Turkic dynasty, previously there was another Turkic dynasty known as the Seljuks. And they were the dominant Turkic group in the Middle East. Basically, for several hundred years following the Prophet Muhammad, the Middle East was ruled by caliphs. Caliphs were the successors to the Prophet Muhammad, and they basically became political leaders, though, and ruled much of the Middle East. But about the year 1000, Turkic tribes started to move into the area and became very powerful. And eventually one particular group, the Seljuks, came to power and built their own empire. Now, during that time, the caliphs were still kind of figurehead rulers, ruling out of Baghdad. But it was these Seljuk rulers who became known as sultans, who really were in charge. Now, early on, there was a group that split off from the main Seljuk group. The Great Seljuk Empire was based out of Persia, but some relatives here started their own sultanate over in what is now Turkey, and that was called the Sultanate of Rum, and they called it Rum after the word for Rome, because it was in the area close to the Byzantine Empire, which was the Roman Empire. So it was this Sultanate of Rum that often came in conflict with the Byzantines and other European powers and were involved in the Crusades. But eventually what happened was the Mongols, of course Genghis Khan and his descendants, started to spread all over Asia, and the Seljuks started to decline in power. So this created a power vacuum that eventually allowed a different group of Turks to become the dominant power, and that was the Ottomans, who we're going to look at now. Now you also can notice here that Osman's mother was actually a descendant of one of the final powerful sultans of Rum, the Seljuk sultans. So there's kind of a connection between these two Turkic dynasties. Okay, so let's look at Osman the First. He had a son named Orhan. And interestingly, Orhan married a Byzantine princess, but it is through another one of his wives or consorts that his line continued. And it was his son Murad who became the next Ottoman ruler. And it was Murad the First who was the first to use the term sultan. So from here forward, all of these Ottoman rulers are known as sultans. Now there was a brief period where Timur the Lame was very powerful in Persia, and so there was some time when the Ottoman power started to decline a little bit, but it jumped back fairly quickly. Now, you'll notice that there's this nice succession, father to son. It's very unlike the European dynasties, where you often run into problems where a monarch doesn't have any sons, and therefore a new dynasty has to take over either through a daughter or some more distant relative. But in these Islamic dynasties, that never happened because there was always lots of sons, because usually the sultans had several consorts or concubines, and so they had lots of children, and there was always lots of sons to take on the reins. Now, they actually ended up having the opposite problem to what happened in Europe, in that there was often several powerful sons that would come into conflict and fight over who would be the next ruler. And often what would happen is when one son won out, they would then kill all their remaining brothers so that there would be no more threats in the future. Now, I should point out here, Bayezid I, he's known for having tried to attack Constantinople and conquer it, but he failed. But quite famously, later on, Sultan Mehmed II tried again, and this time they succeeded. And that's why he is known as Mehmed the Conqueror. He conquered Constantinople, which was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire fell to the Ottomans and ceased to exist. So the Byzantine Empire was also known as the Eastern, is also known to us as the Eastern Roman Empire, but at the time they were simply the Roman Empire. And so 1453 is often thought of as the formal end to the Roman Empire. And from this point forward, it is the Ottomans who are the main power in the region. Now, during the reign of these sultans here, the Ottomans had expanded their territory into much of the Byzantine territory, the Balkans, most of Turkey, etc. So after Constantinople fell, we can now call their territory the Ottoman Empire. And from this point forward, the rulers started to expand even further. So we get Sultan Bayezid II. He's known for accepting Jews into the Middle East after they were kicked out of Spain. And it's his son, Selim I, who becomes the first Ottoman caliph. Now, the caliphs after the fall of Baghdad, the caliphs, who were by that point just figureheads, were based out of Cairo in Egypt. But Sultan Selim I conquered Egypt, and therefore he began to be recognized as the legitimate successor to the Prophet Muhammad and the caliph. And so all of the sultans after this point are both sultan and caliph. And they can also be known as emperors, because the Ottoman territory is now the Ottoman Empire, although it was actually known by several different names, but we usually refer to it as the Ottoman Empire. Selim I had a very famous son, probably the most famous of the Ottoman rulers, and that is Sultan Suleiman I, who is known as Suleiman the Magnificent. And it is during his reign that the Ottoman Empire was kind of at its peak. His father, before him, had conquered much of the Middle East, and so the Ottoman Empire was very large at the time, very powerful, very rich. During the period that followed, women played a very important role in the Ottoman Empire, and therefore some historians refer to this period as the Sultanate of Women. Sometimes it was the mother of the sultan, if the sultan was young, would have quite a lot of influence, or sometimes a wife or consort would have quite a lot of power. And so I've included some of the important women on this chart as well. These terms here, this term is the term for the mother of the sultan, and this term here is for the consort or chief wife of the sultan. And I've just noticed that this date is wrong. This should be 1520 to 1558, and we'll make sure we change that before this chart is printed. Now, Suleiman reigned for a very long time, and several of his sons died either of disease, or he actually had a few of them killed because they were trying to usurp his power. And so one of his younger sons actually ended up becoming the sultan after him, and that was Sultan Selim II. Now, Suleiman also had a daughter who was wielded a lot of power in the empire. She was married to the Grand Vizier. The Grand Vizier is kind of like the Prime Minister. They had a lot of power, and this particular Grand Vizier was probably the most important Grand Vizier in the history of the Ottoman Empire. A very rich and powerful individual, and he was married to the Sultan's daughter. Okay, so after Selim II comes Murad III, and after Murad III comes Mehmed III, and it is after Mehmed III that things change in terms of how the succession worked. Mehmed was succeeded by his son Ahmed I. He built the Blue Mosque in Turkey, but Ahmed I opted not to kill his brother like so many previous sultans had done. And so what happened was, after Ahmed reigned, the next sultan was his younger brother. And so from this point forward, often what would happen is when the sultan died, the oldest relative would become the sultan, and often that would be a brother, and if not a brother, then a son. So things start to look a little bit different from this point forward. So after Ahmed, we get Mustafa I, but then we see the power goes back and forth here a little bit. There was some conflict here. There was Osman II, son of Ahmed, who becomes sultan for a brief period of time, but is actually killed due to some political reasons. And so Mustafa I becomes sultan again, and then it goes to another one of Ahmed's sons before going to a third son. So from this point forward, we often get a lot of different brothers becoming sultans in succession. Now, this particular Sultan Ibrahim, also was killed for political reasons, and he was succeeded by his son Mehmed IV. After Mehmed IV, we get some other younger brothers becoming sultan, and then it's passed on to the children of Mehmed IV, two sons, Mustafa II and Ahmed III. We get a situation whereby several of the grandsons of Mehmed IV are all sultans at various times. You can see here how things pass back and forth between all the various lines that are starting to form. But eventually the line continues through Sultan Abdul Hamid I, and two of his sons become sultan. But is this individual here that I want to highlight. During the reign of Sultan Mahmud II, a lot of reforms were initiated throughout the Ottoman Empire, including some changes in clothing. You can see suddenly the sultans look quite a bit different in what they're wearing. And then two of Mahmud II's sons come after him. And at this point, we're getting very close to the final rulers. And so at this point, there are two different lines. that kind of split off from each other. The first son here, Abdülmecid I, becomes Sultan in the mid-1800s, and then is followed by his brother, Abdülaziz. But then after Abdülaziz, it goes to the more senior relatives that are alive at that point. And so those are the sons of Abdülmecid I. And so 4 different sons rule as sultan. And these are the final 4 sultans of the Ottoman Empire, the final one being Mehmed VI. It is this particular individual, Mehmed V, who was the sultan during World War I. And during World War I, the Ottoman Empire sided with Germany and Austria, and of course they lost the war, and therefore at the end of that war, the Ottoman Empire kind of crumbled and fell apart, and the various portions were divided up amongst European powers. And shortly thereafter, there was a revolution in Turkey, and the monarchy came to an end. Now, after things came to an end here in 1922, there was no longer a sultan. However, there was one final caliph, and that was the son of Abdülaziz, and his name was Abdülmecid II, and he is the last caliph of the Ottomans, and in fact of Islam as a whole, because after this individual, there's been a few people who have claimed to be caliph here and there, but really the title has fallen out of use. So now we get the question, who is the successor today? Who would be the sultan if the Ottoman Empire was still around or was revived? Well, it's not as easy a question to answer as you'd think, because, as I mentioned earlier, the rules of succession state that the eldest male becomes the sultan, or becomes head of the family. The family is now known as the Osmanoglu family, and there are several different lines here. You can see descendants of the various final sultans, the descendants of this last caliph, and descendants of another brother as well. So there are 6 different lines, and there are males in all these lines. So at any given time, if you want to know who the heir is, you would have to find who is the eldest male in the family, and that person would be head of the house. So the current head of the family is this individual here. Very hard to find a good picture of him, but his name is Ali Osman, and then after him would come his son, whose name is Harun, and they both belong to this particular line here. They are male line descendants of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, one of the final sultans of the Ottoman Empire. So there you have the family tree of Ottoman sultans. And again, if you want more information about where you can buy this entire poster, you can find out on my website, usefulcharts.com/Asia. Thanks for watching.